Hi Lisa, isn't it possible to realize the true self without having the shift that most spiritual speaks refer to? I find life experiences to be at times very painful with lots of suffering and the identification until there is a forced surrender. Can you shed some light on this? Thanks. No, it's an energetic shift, and it can be that that energetic shift reveals itself and then it covers up again, but you can't realize it without that shift. Like you can't realize it, the person can't realize it, it's beyond the person. The person can have this awakening where it feels like it can turn and look at itself, and it knows what it is, but that's still somebody's experience. There's something beyond that that knows itself. It's not divided. So I find life experiences to be very painful. But if we look at things logically on the human level, I'm sorry I'm fidgeting, I'm very hot, and every time I put my feet up I'm getting stuck to the seat. So I'm fidgeting, I suppose, to keep myself cool. Which most probably doesn't work. So let's look at this painful and pleasurable thing. So logically, we're not going to be in pleasure 90% of the time. That's what most people hope for. So most people hope that in their life they're going to be in pleasure 90% of the time, or 100% of the time, and that's what they think a happy life is, that I'm in pleasure for 90 to 100% of the time. But that's not logical. If we logically look at it, we're more than likely going to be 50-50. Let's look at the way pleasure and pain is set up. So pain is an indicator that there's something you've got to move away from, and pleasure is the indicator that there's something you've got to move towards. And then we've also got this logical thinking that like watches over us as well. Like if we're going towards addiction, like the heroin, like pleasurable, or the alcohol. Actually, you don't snort heroin. You go, I think. So we've also got this logical mind, but this is the way we're set up as mammals, and I think this is exclusive to mammals, that we have this setup where we have feelings and thoughts towards pleasure and away from pain. So if you logically think of it, it's most likely going to be 50-50, but because currently in the West we're having such a peak of survival, then you'd think that what we should be in the West is more than 50-50. We should be more 60-40, but it's actually most probably not the case, because it also becomes too stressful living in the West. So people experience a lot of stress. So that's what logically we're set up for, is 50% of the time pain and 50% of the time pleasure. And we need that, because we need to know what's not helpful for us to move away from. We also have this other thing that like chimpanzees and other animals don't have, is we have this ability to think about the future and think that if we do this now, then it will be better in the future. So, and this isn't to do with suffering, this is just a practical thing. So if I do this 8 hours of work, then I'll get paid at the end of the month. And if I work for this company, I'll have this job for the rest of my life. So we also have this ability to think like that, which also can induce pain as well, because it means that we have to do something that we're maybe not naturally inclined to do in order for the greater good at the end of the day. So maybe as modern animals, we do actually experience more pain than pleasure because of that factor. But these are just practical things. We're not going to talk about the illusion of self yet and how that plays a part, because that does play a part. It produces neurotic thinking, and all these types of things. But if we look at it on just the human bodily level, then we should constantly throughout the day be oscillating between pain and pleasure. And our body, if it's balanced, should be able to navigate around this world without causing too much havoc and craziness, and should find relative peace in the outside world. Relative peace, dependent on the country you're from and your background and everything. So just to manage your expectations, you shouldn't be in pleasure all the time. That's not a realistic goal or expectation. But most people have this expectation. This is where the identified self begins to play in. So because we can think in time, we have this expectation that we're always going to experience pleasure, or that we should always be experiencing pleasure, or I should always be happy. And this is where the identification plays in, because once you've identified that you're a person, then you begin to identify this pain and pleasure spectrum, and then you begin to want to always be in pleasure. And it's like imagine being happy and then desiring to be sad. It's like an impossible dynamic to do. It's like you're happy, imagine being sad, like you've got to be sad, you've got to be sad now. It's something that just happens, and this actually begins to screw the person up. So you identify with the person, and then you identify that pleasure equals happiness, and that you should have pleasure 100% of the time, and pain equals unhappiness, and you shouldn't ever have pain. And then you get into this drama of always seeking pleasure, and this begins to form neurotic thinking of expectation, of shame, of guilt, of blame, of pride. Not that you don't have those feelings without identification, but it highlights them and makes them exaggerated. It exaggerates worry, exaggerates anxiety, because your belief is that if you're not always in pleasure, then you're going to hell. It's like pleasure becomes Jesus Christ, pleasure becomes God. And this is really why the human suffers, putting this much emphasis on pleasure and pain. Pleasure equals love, equals freedom, equals safety. Pain equals death, equals bad things, and takes away all my liberties. It's hell. Pain is hell, and pleasure is heaven. And actually, it's just experiencing. So as an animal, if it's being chased by something, then it experiences pain. And then when it stops being chased by something, it's like, then it goes to eating the grass, which might be neutral or might be slightly pleasurable. And then it goes to having sex, which might be immensely pleasurable. And that's its experience. It's totally engulfed in what's happening. Whereas the human is always watching itself, imagining itself, and then expecting it should always be in pleasure, and trying to never experience pain. And this gets it stuck in the body as well. So for the human, so sometimes when humans have been doing that for lots of years, then it builds up pain in the body. So the animal runs from the tiger, is terrified, and then after the tiger's left, it goes through a detox, and then it's eating grass again, it's not holding on to it. Whereas the human holds on to it mentally and cannot let go of this, keeps repeating it and getting stuck into thoughts about what just happened, it's going to happen again. What if this happens? What if that happens? I need this insurance and that insurance. I need 100 insurances to make sure that if the tiger chases me, I'm okay. I mean, you can kind of see it in our society. Like, we kind of make things difficult for ourselves. Like we're forced to have all these insurances. So I have like 6 or 7 insurances that, I think I have lots actually, that I'm forced to have when I have a business, when I have a home, and by the government, they force you to have all these healthcare and benefit insurances as well. So if I go broke, I get insurances, and etc., etc. And in one way, that means that it stops us being really traumatized if something difficult does happen. But what it does is it means that we have to work a lot harder to maintain an income, to a high enough income to keep all these insurances. And then it puts a lot of stress onto the person. And we're terrified of experiencing people dying, of people not having hope, of people not having health care, of people not having drugs or medication, or people not having 85 years or 90 years of life. And we're terrified of going through all that. And I do understand it's really traumatic, but our identification makes it worse. And we kind of make life harder for ourselves. It means we all have to work harder, which then produces stress chemicals. But I also understand that the impact on society, if you have like 10% or 20% of people really traumatized by things they've seen, from not having all these insurances and not getting the treatment that they need, or not having somebody to help them rebuild their house, that then this can create havoc in society, because then these people go deeply into suffering, and as they go deeply into suffering, they'll do really hateful things. Or there'll be a big drain onto society. So I forgot what the original question was. So unless I work with you privately, I don't know what your pain is about. It could be stress, it could be too much work, or it could be difficult thinking patterns that are always being activated by your daily life circumstances. But the main problem is the identification with that. But sometimes that needs to be looked at in order for there to be a release of that identification. High thoughts. There is a longing in my body to calm down, to find the absolute rest, and I'm looking to get that from sex and romantic experiences, but I also know it won't work in the end. I wish I could find this rest right here. It is right here. But your body does crave, the body does desire naturally to have romantic and sexual experiences. There's nothing wrong with it, but you're not going to find what you look for in it. So it's great that you see that. Wouldn't anyone who has a deep shift like you have compassion even if they never had much empathy? A big sticking point for many around non-duality is what about all that are suffering, innocent children, animals, etc. If we'll be numb to that when we see nothing is real in the dream. Well, I'm certainly not numb to it, but my experience is that there are people that seem to have this shift that are numb to it. So I just think that we can't make any judgments. I don't know what it looks like in other people. And compassion is a human thing. It's not the absolute, life is compassionate in the sense that it holds and supports everything as it is right now. But it doesn't have inherently a feeling of compassion or an action of compassion. And I don't know what it manifests like in all these different body types. Who says a sociopath can't have an awakening? That's what happened in one of the Buddhist stories that I've told many times. Suddenly my mouth got tired. I think I was really talking a lot. My mouth got tired. I would really enjoy to listen to some music with you now, but because of all the YouTube bans around the world, copyright bans, I can't do that with you. But maybe that's enough for tonight. I've been talking a lot. I forgot to advertise, so let me just do my advertisement for events coming up. Next week I'm at No Mind Festival. You can look that up, No Mind Festival in Sweden. In 2 or 3 weeks' time I do a talk in London, in Notting Hill. You can also find that on my website. And then in August I do a retreat in northern Germany near Hamburg on the Baltic Sea. So you can also join me for that. Thanks guys, I wish you well and I send you lots of love. Have a beautiful evening. Bye. Oh, and by the way, for those that listen regularly, I will not be streaming this Wednesday. I will not be streaming. So I shall see, and I won't be streaming next Sunday actually. I'm in Sweden. So actually you have to check my website. I think it'll be a couple of weeks before I stream again. So check my website and on Facebook page. Thank you. Lots of love. Bye.